Hi everyone, and welcome to this final two-part video in the 250 bird challenge. I'm going to take a look back at our birding big year of 2023 to talk about some of the things that went well, some of the things that maybe didn't go quite so well, how the challenge changed a little bit over time, some of the controversy maybe over our trip to California and the inclusion of some California birds, but of course as well I'm going to show you some of the highlights and the birds we saw, so stay tuned, I'll be back in a moment. The idea to do a 250 bird challenge, specifically as a vlog, started to take shape in 2022. We had a trip to Algonquin Park on the eBird Global Big Day. We decided we'd try to see 50 birds that day and film the experience. We had the graphics going on with the counter in the top corner of the screen that you'll be familiar with if you watch these videos. We decided to take that and apply it to a full year in 2023, but before I talk about that, let's take a look at a few clips from that Algonquin trip. We've also set ourselves the target of trying to see 50 birds today, different species if we can. So far we've already seen a blue jay, a yellow-rumped warbler, and what did we think that was up there?
Black-throated green.
Yeah, we're looking at a black-throated green warbler right now, we think. We're currently at the Logging Museum at the eastern edge of Algonquin Park. The video of our 50 bird challenge at Algonquin Park is worth a watch if you haven't seen it yet. Spoiler alert, we didn't make it, but it was an exciting challenge that gave us extra impetus, and the jeopardy made for fun viewing. So why did we land on the target of 250 birds for this challenge? Well, in 2022 we saw 200 bird species. That was in Ontario, as well as a trip back to England. In 2023 we knew we'd be going to California, more on that later. 250 felt like a good stretch goal, a number that would give us the opportunity to learn more about identifying some trickier birds. As the 1st of January rolled around 2023, our first trip was to Lynn Shores, where we hoped to see some of the more common species. During that video, I started to talk about some of the rules that we would have to follow. This year, I want to try to see 250 birds through the year, and that's something I'm going to try and chronicle in these videos. So today at Lynn Shores, we're going to try and make a start on that. So here's how it works. We have to see 250 different species of bird. Take this footage. In this shot, there are several mallard ducks, some male, some female. This counts as one bird species. It doesn't matter if I see a different mallard tomorrow or next week. I've seen mallards, they're checked off the list. I have to do this for 249 other species now. No, that's not a bird, that's a deer. It doesn't count. It has to be a unique species of bird. Oh look, there's some Canada geese. So now we've got 2 birds and need another 248. Look, you get the idea, just follow along. I have until the end of December 31st, 2023 to do this. One new rule that we brought in after that Lynn Shores trip was I had to be able to film the bird and show it to you guys for it to count towards the 250. At Lynn Shores we did see 3 or 4 species that were fairly common that we did count and didn't show, but going forward I had to film the bird for you guys to see it for it to count towards 250. Here's some of the birds we saw through the month of January, including some common but necessary birds like this northern cardinal, and great looks at a red-bellied woodpecker. We were pleased to see some winter species before they migrated away, like this American tree sparrow, and perhaps more notably a snowy owl. During January we managed to see the vast majority of the duck species, many of which spend their winters here. I won't show all of them, but here's a large raft of ducks and geese, and we also saw all 3 mergansers. Common, red-breasted, and my favourite, the hooded merganser. We saw one duck that seemed to elude us all through January, which became our nemesis bird for the month, the redhead. We eventually saw it on a trip to Niagara towards the end of the month. A few other notables, a winter plumage horned grebe, a nice flyby from a bald eagle, and a savanna sparrow, which is notable because most of them migrate away before winter, but this one probably stayed, or perhaps came back early. We're gonna have to talk about gulls. Coming into the 250 bird challenge, we knew we would have to get better at IDing some of the less commonly seen gulls. Here's a great black-backed gull, and a bit more of a rare one, an Iceland gull. Now let's talk about some of the other rare birds we saw. All of the following birds are also lifers. A lifer, if you're newer to birding, is a bird that you're seeing for the first time in your life. We saw our first evening grosbeaks. We got great looks at a handsome male harlequin duck. And we went looking for a Townsend solitaire, which is a species usually found in Western Canada. We actually saw quite a few lifers in January, but I'm not going to list all of them. Many of them were ducks that we started paying a bit more attention to for the first time, such as this white-winged scotter. Pretty successful January, and it's worth closing out the month with this monster double-crested cormorant eating a monster fish.
Christ.
In total, we saw 62 species in January.
Yeah, now what?
Now I don't need to eat for another month.
Another thing that has changed with the 250 bird challenge is not so much the challenge itself, but more this YouTube channel. When I started it, it was just me wandering around the province looking at various bits of scenery and talking about birds here and there. But since the challenge started, Sara, my wife, has joined me pretty much from the onset, although she couldn't make it into this video, so shout out and much appreciation to Sara. Anyway, let's take a look at what February and March brought us. The month began with a very snowy trip to Algonquin Park. We saw our first spruce grouse of the year, initially when it shook its butt at us.
Nice bit. Yeah, gorgeous. Shake it again.
We also saw a couple of owls in February, another snowy owl and this barred owl. We had some close encounters with some other raptors, including a red-tailed hawk, and a northern harrier, and a turkey vulture. Just the one lifer for February. While driving, we got a quick look at a horned lark. February was a little bit tougher, just 10 new species, perhaps because we'd done so well in January with 61 species, and it was still winter. Moving on to March, we started off the month with a rare bird for the Toronto area. An obliging hoary redpoll was hanging around for a while at Colonel Samuel Smith Park. We saw several more raptors, including another hawk, this time a Cooper's, and an urban peregrine falcon. One of Sara's favourite eastern birds is the pileated woodpecker, and we saw one of those on a trip near Peterborough. As April arrived, so did more migratory birds. Stay tuned while we take a look at April. When I get back, we'll talk about the controversy around our trip to California and the inclusion of California birds. We began April with a visit to Colonel Sam Smith Park. Tree swallows had recently arrived, a sure sign that we were finally saying goodbye to snow and freezing temperatures. Easter came at the beginning of the month, which gave us the opportunity to travel to southwestern Ontario to take in Rondeau Provincial Park, London and Windsor. Some bluebirds migrate while others stay resident. Whichever is the case with this pair, we got our first sighting near London. One duck we hadn't seen until now was the blue-winged teal, because unlike many other duck species, this one winters further south before migrating north. We hit our 100th species in April. We've been pretty surprised not to have seen a Bonaparte gull on this trip. They're pretty common around the shore of Lake Erie, but fail not, one did a flyby as we were looking out over the viewing platform. And it's our 100th bird! That's great news, isn't it? Except no, not really. Do I really want a gull to be my 100th bird? Well, too bad I guess. Let's wait for the 200th. I really wanted to get a tufted titmouse, and they're more common in this region. We finally saw several in Windsor. We were really fortunate to see a great horned owl and 2 owlets.
So cool.
We also saw a couple of rare birds in April. On our way back from the southwest, we saw an eared grebe just outside London. This grebe is more commonly seen in the west. Back in Toronto, a lark sparrow turned up at Ashbridges Bay. Lark sparrows are a grassland species more typically found in the Canadian prairies and American Midwest. We had a good April with 34 species. 3 of them were lifers, including the eared grebe from earlier, plus a fox sparrow I didn't really get very good footage of, and this vesper sparrow. Now, let's talk about California and our decision to include that state's birds in our 250 bird challenge. As I said earlier in this video, we set ourselves a target of 250 birds this year. The previous year we saw 200 birds, but that did include a trip to England. When we set 250 as the target for this year, we knew we had a trip lined up to California, and we figured we'd see roughly the same number of birds as we saw in England the previous year during that trip. Maybe a little bit more, but we also knew that we were travelling in May, and that means we would be missing the warbler migration in southern Ontario. Most people were pretty supportive of us counting the birds from California, but there were a few dissenting voices. Some people thought we could see all of the birds in California if we were there for long enough. Others thought we just shouldn't count them full stop. But we decided to go with it. As I said, we'd missed the warbler migration. We also weren't dedicated to birding while we were in California. We did have other activities going on when we were there, and as I mentioned, we just wouldn't have set the goal as high as 250 without that California trip. So, there you go. There's the controversy. Let's move on and take a look at the first half of our trip to California in May. Well, where to start with California? I'll cover part in this video and pick up the rest in part 2 of this review. Everything we saw was amazing, and we saw so many lifers I just don't have time to list them all. So, if you haven't seen my California videos, check out my channel page, there's a California playlist. We landed in San Francisco and began driving south along the Pacific Coast Highway, stopping at different spots at our leisure. One of our first major stops was Ano Nuevo State Park, which was also probably one of my favourite places. Early on, we saw an awesome bird, a white-tailed kite. We also saw a California thrasher, the only one we'd see on the whole trip. Alright, it's not a bird, but we got really close to a humpback whale breaching on a boat tour. In Morro Bay, we saw one of several red-shouldered hawks, a bit more common in California where they're resident, compared to being more migratory in southern Ontario. Another spot we really loved was San Jacinto Wildlife Area. We got good views of a couple of beautiful American avocets. And a bird that was a big target for Sara, a black-necked stilt. Here's an aptly named great-tailed grackle, a much longer tail than the common grackle of Ontario. We also saw our first western tanager. And I was driving down a gravel road and noticed a bird with a funky hooked beak, drove back and realised we were looking at a loggerhead shrike. One of my favourite parts of the trip to California was into the mountains. It was just beautiful, peaceful, a fun drive, but you'll have to tune into part 2 of this review of the 250 bird challenge and our 2023 birding big year, where I'll cover the rest of California and the rest of our year from May until December. Oh, and not long after part 2 of this video, I'm going to reveal what our brand new challenge is going to be for 2024. I hope you'll join us for that when we are back out into the field. Won't be long now. I appreciate your likes, comments, and especially your subscriptions. Thanks for watching this video. Happy birding.